Ladies and gentlemen, when we think of Nintendo now, in its current state, you think of the word success. The Nintendo Switch has exceeded everybody's expectations, probably even Nintendo's expectations, right? And when we think about the future of Nintendo, we also think about success. And in my opinion, I don't think Nintendo will ever fail again. And I think I figured out the reason why. So let's just go ahead and get right into this video. So my voice is still kind of gone a little bit, but it's a lot better, way better than yesterday. And I was thinking about the future of Nintendo, and I don't think they will ever fail. Like when we look at the previous generation, it wasn't looking so good, and if the Switch was a failure, we might have had like another Sega situation. So before we get started, if you could hit a like and subscribe, it would really mean a lot to me, and let's just go ahead and get right into this video. So to look at the future of Nintendo and why I think they will never fail, first we need to go back and look at the past and kind of build a pattern. So to establish this pattern, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the release date of home consoles and handheld consoles. We see the NES was released in 1985, the Game Boy in 1989. That's just a 4-year gap between two different kinds of consoles, home console and handheld console. NES 1990, the Game Boy 1989. That's a 1-year gap between a handheld console and a home console. The Game Boy Pocket was released in 1996. Nintendo 64 1996. That's two different kinds of consoles released in the same year. The Game Boy Color was released in 1998. That's a 2-year gap between 3 different consoles releasing for Nintendo. Then we have the GameCube that was released in 2001, and the Game Boy Advance also released in 2001. And now that I'm thinking about it, these might be my 2 favorite Nintendo consoles of all time. So 2001 was good to a little baby robot Joe. And also, I don't think a lot of people realize that this is the GameCube colors. The first Game Boy Advance, like the color of it, they were the same colors. Just 3 years later, we got the Nintendo DS. 3 years between 3 consoles releasing. And these are 3 different consoles entirely. Just 2 years later, the Nintendo Wii. Do you see how many different consoles are coming out every few years? And these are different consoles entirely. Then we had a 5-year gap. I know we got like the DS XL and some other shit in between, but a 5-year gap between the first real different console. So in 2011, the 3DS, and in 2012, we get the Wii U, which is kind of a prototype for the Switch. It's a home console, but it's kind of a handheld, but you can't really leave the house with it, so is it really a handheld console? And we know this thing was a massive failure. Looking back on it, I think we were a little harsh on this console. I think the library is pretty strong, but I think it just didn't make that much sense. Because like I previously mentioned, it's a home console. But they wanted to give it that handheld console feel. But if you're like me, I wanted to be able to leave the house with my handheld console, you know? And I can't do that with the Wii U. So Nintendo thought, how can we fix this problem? And it took 5 years. And we got the Switch. But all the way from 1985 until 2012. That's a lot of years. Nintendo put out a home console and a handheld console. So I don't know how business works per se, especially in Nintendo, right? I'm just a consumer, and I make YouTube videos about Nintendo stuff, but I'm still just a consumer. But for 32 years, Nintendo released a home and handheld console. Since these are 2 different things, a handheld console, which is little tiny stuff being built, and then a home console, which is much larger scale, I would assume that's 2 separate departments. So you have a team over here, and you have a team over here. Sometimes you have, in my opinion, 2 home runs. Like, I know the GameCube wasn't a massive success, and even though it's my favorite console, I remember at the time it wasn't super well received because people would rather play the Xbox or the PS2, but I loved it, and I think the library is so strong. And I think the leap from the Nintendo 64 to the GameCube is one of the biggest leaps in gaming history with graphics and gameplay. But the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance in 2001, I think they knocked that both out of the park. There's other generations where I don't think that's the case. So now let's come up to 2017 again, the release of the Nintendo Switch. This, by all accounts, is a hybrid console. It's a home console, and it's also a legit handheld console. You can take this on the go, or you can dock it and play it at home. So now, Nintendo doesn't have to make 2 separate consoles. They don't have to make a home console and a handheld console. We have both consoles in one, and I would assume you now don't have 2 separate departments working on this. That handheld console department and the home console department, which I know some of the developers and creators overlap, right? I get that. I'm not saying they didn't know what the hell was going on in each one, but it's all working together now. And we see Nintendo, when they try, are able to make some amazing games fit on the Switch. Like, as much as it is a home console, I think it really fits the narrative of a handheld console. As we can see, we don't have the most powerful stuff on it like Call of Duty and GTA, but there are some exceptions where we get some amazing ports, like the Doom port, for example. And I think now that Nintendo doesn't have to focus on two separate ideas, like, oh my god, what's the next home console going to be? Okay, we've kind of got that. What's the next handheld console going to be? What are the gimmicks? What's the marketing? Now that that's all in one area, and they also see that that works, and it's well received, I don't think Nintendo will ever fail again. Does that mean everything is going to be as big a success of the Switch? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I don't think we're ever going to go down the route of the Wii U. I think Nintendo knows what we want. I don't think we're going to get as much risk as we did in previous consoles where there was always the craziest gimmick. But I think this is what it's going to be moving forward. And I think that's great. So instead of focusing on gimmicks, Nintendo can now focus on innovation. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see with the Switch 2. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think about all this? Do you think Nintendo will fail like the Wii U? Or do you think that's in the past? Do you think Nintendo should make multiple consoles, a home and a handheld? Or do you think they should keep it a hybrid like the Switch? Please forgive my voice. I think I should be good, back to normal in like another day or two. Then I have a really big video I'm going to work on where I actually film outside the house. So thank you for bearing with me. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you could. And you guys know me. I'll see you soon with a new video. Peace out.